spot on with f4, and it does make a lot of sense to open these bishops in one way or another. And it's always the question, do you push the pawn to g3, do you push it to g4? We've seen already yesterday that Firouzja likes to push his pawns forward, and sometimes even to his detriment. So in his game against
Green, but we were seeing Alireza and Levon there, also a very interesting position from the start. And here we've got the two players in their games that we were discussing about Ding with the knights jumping forward. And I think this is something that we briefly touched upon yesterday, Nicholas, that how much we prefer the pawns in front of the knight rather than the knight in front of the pawns as we see in this position. But the dynamics of the two bishops on g1 and h1 made it more difficult for the players to achieve that central d4, e4 control.
Yeah, absolutely, Tanya. I was also reminded of the game yesterday in the last round where Ding played against Gukesh and pretty much had no chance with the black pieces. And he also played the knight to d6 and played the knight to f7. And that was the start of the end, as Gukesh also put it in the interview afterwards. So here again, putting the knights in front of the pawns, and that's something we've seen again and again, is usually not the best decision, of course. There are always exceptions to this rule, but in this particular case, knight d3 was not approved by the engine. The engine wanted to maybe first play d4 or maybe play a4, gain some space here, involve this rook on the a file, and after knight d3, already the engine swings in favor of Magnus. Knight d6 also puts the knight in front of the pawn, but this is okay because there are squares available and there's an immediate threat against this pawn, whereas this knight is not really doing anything on d3. So knight e3 protected this pawn on c4, and also here the computer likes to expand with a5, a4, and I think those are exactly the kind of moves which are really difficult for humans to find in freestyle chess. Suddenly just pushing the a pawn or maybe the h pawn forward. Another sensible move would be to go knight e6 here. Actually, Magnus played knight e6 and knight e5. It feels like a dance of the knights here, Peter.
Yeah, it's a tango, and yeah, knight e5 was clear. Yeah, it was obvious that Ding is trying to get knight e5 and then eventually d2, d4 in. If he gets that, then we would be calling actually a wonderful strategy. Yeah, our concern is that White isn't able to establish that control. However, talking about this, how does Black stop this? I'm a little bit struggling to find a convincing way. First of all, let's just highlight that Black's queen cannot really move from d8, for example, out to b6 or a5, because there will be knight takes d7 check. Yeah, so Black's queen has to guard that pawn. It's kind of intriguing. The move knight e6, allowing knight e5. Clearly, Magnus had to foresee something, yeah, because it was obvious that White wants to play knight e5. And is there...
g5 was played.
Wow, g5, immediately targeting, yeah, immediately breaking the construction. That makes perfect sense. The vulnerable f4 pawn is attacked, and how do we protect this? Maybe we shouldn't be protecting, because I don't see a good way. I don't want to play a move like queen f1. That's way too passive. Maybe it's fine, but intuitively it does not come to me as a natural one.
And I think we've got to move in after g5 instead of protecting the f4 pawn. Liren on the offense, he strikes on that d6 knight, pushing his own pawn forward. And the point is that with the move g6, it has its own set of drawbacks. The f5 pawn is undefended once the knight moves away from that defense. So this is getting wild from the very beginning. Magnus captures on f4, saying if you take the knight on d6, he would have picked up the knight on e3.
position. Let me just make the most natural moves. The rook entered the second rank. How is Ding handling the situation?
He's trying to trade off a pair of rooks.
Yes, but at the same time this means that the rook from e6 even after trade would need to retreat, which would give back all the activity Magnus takes.
And now he can capture the G file, or does he go for a rook trade? He captures the G file. He wants to start putting pressure on white's pawns. That bishop on c2, Ding's bishop, there are no targets. The pawn on f5 is coming in its own ways. If this bishop could somehow reach e6 at some point, you can imagine counterplay. And look at the way black's pawns, Magnus's pawns, are taking away the mobility of the light square bishop.
Yeah, but look at the clock situation. This is what I was telling, that somehow Ding has to slow down. There is just no need, no reason to rush. Yeah, that's why he built this long short castle. He has 50 minutes, he has 60 minutes, but the position is lost. Yeah, you can't show your skills here. You have to make sure that you have all these kind of tricky moves which changing the character of the position, like these castles, which is so vital in this freestyle chess, under control, and you can only do that by investing enough time. He needs to calm his nerves down and slow down and take it much slower.
Because those 15.5 minutes on the clock will not help you in this endgame. It will not help you in this position. Magnus now rerouting his bishop, and I think that's really great technique from the Magnus touch endgame that he's showing. He doesn't go forward with his pawns just yet. He wants his pieces on the most ideal position. What Ding is really hoping for is to start pushing this pawn at some moment so that the bishop can come into play. Right now, the rook is under attack.
Yeah, basically bishop c5 almost forces resignation because it hits the rook. The rook has to stay on the second rank in order to protect the h2 pawn, but then Magnus is gonna go bishop d6, and there is no more f6 trick or whatever, and the h2 pawn will fall, and then black will even, yeah, there is the handshake. Ding has had enough.
And that is the 5th loss in a row for the world champion Ding Liren in the freestyle chess. It has been a heartbreaking start for him. Magnus picking up momentum. Meanwhile, he started slow on day 1, but with a win against Levon and now a win against Ding, Magnus is back.
Yeah, look at his body language. Yeah, he immediately is a completely different Magnus. Yeah, he's the Magnus that we